All right, hello. So hopefully everything is going through and my boomer tech issues aren't an issue again. We were doing this for. I've been wanting to do a live stream on my channel for quite some time, and I just haven't had the opportunity. I've been traveling. No, the first tech issue of the night. Yeah, so I was planning on doing a stream, but I've been traveling a lot and working a lot, and the opportunity hasn't really come up, not the least of which because I've been streaming on a lot of other people's channels. So I decided to take a break and just do a stream. I didn't really have a topic prepared, so I couldn't do a proper distance stream. And also, my wonderful wife also wanted to do something, so we decided to do a stream tonight, just generally on the world. I hesitate to say after the COOF or after COVID-19, because apparently at this stage we know that it's probably never going to end. This is just the new normal. There's going to be infinite numbers of these. It's going to be an infinite regress of booster shots and weird interplay between the government and the workers on who's employed. And yeah, I guess that's what I want to talk about, but I should ask you to just say hello.
Hello, David. Thank you for having me. Hello, everyone. I'm only going to be here for like 20 minutes, 30 minutes, and then I'm going to piss off and play Skyrim, so.
Yeah, well, you can stay for as long as you like. But,
thank you, but
I don't know. I
can only stand so much serious discussion in one sitting, so,
Well, yeah, and it's good that we do things together, and I think that, I don't know if I really have a ton. I think stuff will come to the surface when we think about it for a little bit. But I think what sort of seized America in these last 2 years is this overwhelming sense of lethargy, with just sense like, okay, this is going to blow over, and then we're going to design our lives after, like for what comes after. Even progressives who are like part of the Great Reset. Well, I don't know. They don't self-identify themselves that way. But even progressives looking forward to some kind of social revolution coming either from communism or Joe Biden or Klaus Schwab or something like that, they all see the new world coming. But what if it just stays like this? What if it just stays like this constant level of
limbo?
Of degrading standards of life. And that's sort of what we're actually looking at, if we're serious, right?
Do we think this is all orchestrated so that Marxism could take over? Do you think this is
absolute
absolute
ineptitude?
Boomer
Nonsense.
Yeah, total ineptitude, right?
Well, ineptitude sounds like it's coming from a personal, like there's a specific set of people or people who are incompetent.
Mismanagement.
Yeah, but I think I would call it degeneration, because this is coming from large structural features of our society decaying. It's not because, there are a lot of corrupt people in charge, and in some ways our society promotes that and prioritizes that. Mm-hmm. It's the fact that it prioritizes it is due to the fact that the fundamentals are degenerating or are kind of getting flushed down the toilet. Basically, the institutions we've developed that were supposed to hold up the fundamentals are collapsing. Mm-hmm. And I don't know, they're not collapsing necessarily like a building would collapse. They're sort of collapsing in on itself the way like a mountain would collapse in on itself, or, a very old foundation would collapse in on itself, sort of slowly tottering over. Like Venice is slowly collapsing.
Yeah. And
I don't know. Guys, much right-wing thought sort of relies on this reaching a tipping point, but I'm not necessarily convinced that's going to happen. So I don't know. I guess I wanted to talk a little bit about that. So guys, if you want to super chat me, you'll notice that I have an entropy link. I'm going to post this again in the chat. I probably will focus a lot more on the questions because, again, I don't have really a speech or a talk that I wouldn't have streamed because I didn't really have time to prepare anything like that. So, I will be leaning a little bit on that. But since I have my wonderful wife here, what do you think about? What if this is it? What if nothing changes from where we are right now? Within our
day-to-day life.
Yeah, for an extended period of time. I think that's the reality that no one really wants to talk about.
Well,
but it's kind of
now that I'm a mom, screw me. Like, how is this going to affect my kid? That's what I want to know.
Well, yeah,
he's he's just turned 2.
We have to kind of limit the amount of information
I understand.
we
I
got
understand.
about. Okay.
He's I mean, it's no secret. We put him in nursery school part-time, and he has to wear a mask. And it's outrageous. It is outrageous.
And the teachers don't like it either, but
no.
it's the mandate.
Yeah, they could be in big trouble if they don't enforce this. And so when I'm sent pictures of my kid wearing a mask at school, and I know he hates it. He can never wear one for us. It's outrageous.
It's ridiculous.
They're too young.
Because he's absolutely caught every single disease he possibly could have in the first 2 months. Yeah. We had 3 months of just continuously being sick with one thing or the other.
I counted 6 colds and 2 ear infections.
Yeah, and we got the most of them in an on-off cycle.
Yeah, it's been brutal, and so that is a complete charade. Him wearing a mask and vaccinations as well. I have a friend with several kids. She's like, I'm never going to have my children vaccinated. I'll homeschool them first. And she just gave in to the social pressure of just having her children vaccinated. So I mean, I don't care about myself.
That's the big thing is that, we can't, people talk about the barrier being the government. People see the barrier every day, for any kind of change or discussion on this. The barrier is what our parents' generation is able to talk about, and not so much your parents, because your parents are kind of like, what would you call them, Stephen Harper conservatives, yeah. And not incredibly thoughtful ones. But I'm talking about really my extended family with just, the most boomer understanding of the world. Everything is going fine. This is just a minor correction. We're on year 2 of 2 weeks to stop the spread. And the attitude hasn't changed, right?
Okay, but there are... from your side of the family, my side of the family, I've heard bits of wisdom, is that there are people who've been alive many, many decades more than we've been alive, and they have seen kind of the ebb and flow of this sort of behavior in society where things look like they've gone to shit, and day-to-day life is very different. Day-to-day life is very difficult, but it eventually goes back to normal. Then something else will come again for another couple of years and go back to normal. I think that's why a lot of them are a little more optimistic about this, because they just see this as a natural part of history where you're going to go through some times that are really tough and are difficult to understand, but they end up resolving themselves somehow. Now, can you blame?
No, I disagree with your premise. I think that you might be right with my father. My father has living memories of World War II. Mm-hmm. As a young child, and World War II in Europe, Eastern Europe as a young child. I think he's seen things like this. He hasn't really seen preludes to this, but this whole idea that there's this natural pendulum that draws us away from the precipice, and that things like this is, if things are bad now, then they have to be getting better in 5 or 10 years. There's no guarantee of that. That's boomerist nonsense, right?
No, of course there's no guarantee. They're just going on patterns that they themselves have experienced. And on a personal level, I know you personally, you tend to be a little more pessimistic.
Well, I tend to be pessimistic because I tend to be more realistic.
No, people feel safer in pessimism so they don't become disappointed. So
I think that, in some sense you might be able to say that, I am a pessimistic personality. But I think that, the boomer optimism is what's stopping things from... for instance, let's stick with... there's one big problem we have on the right currently is that... And this is something that I don't want to... I don't want to pick a fight over other people on the right on this topic. But they tend to go, straight at the cathedral narrative. And they attack it at its strongest point. And they try to contest the effectiveness of vaccinations, or they try to figure out statistical anomalies that have to do with negative consequences, of which there are a few, mm-hmm. and they try to build that into a larger case against the government strategy.
That's not going to work though.
Well, yeah, it doesn't. It never works. Well, it never works because the government controls the information and the data. And the experts. And so the narratives constantly get put on the back foot. I mean, to my mind, though, you don't even need to go... What I said before is that, in order to prove that the government is mishandling this, you don't need to go past the origin of this virus, which the government has at this point almost acknowledged.
Do you mind? I don't mean to stop your train of thought, but can we take 2 steps back? I want to hear more of your opinion. Why do you think the boomers are not as... tense about this.
Well, I'm getting to that actually. The thing is that this discussion, like, why haven't we? It's been 2 years, right? We're not in any kind of. I mean, you could say it's bad, but we're not in some kind of absolute emergency where we can't discuss anything else. We had a huge conversation about race. And that didn't stop anything, right? So the question is, like, why hasn't the government essentially admitted its role in creating this and the Chinese government's role in creating this?
Because they need it.
Of course, but, like, why isn't that a big deal with the boomer set, right? They're so obsessed about this virus and they don't care about where it comes from. And it's because they're in this mode where they're like, well, they can't believe, part of them can't believe, like, they know it's not from a wet market anymore, right?
Yeah.
Part of them can't believe the government, that the institutions that were essentially trusting to fight this virus had the most hand in creating the situation that we're in right now, which means trusting them with risky propositions is already questionable because they already miffed this one.
Okay, do you think the boomers, for the many decades that they've been alive before us, the government has been stable and more or less trustworthy, although still with corruption, but do you think that their lifetime experience of government has been one of trust, and they just simply can't rip that reality from under their feet without them having some sort of real crisis of faith in their
absolutely
government?
Absolutely.
Right,
This is the boomers, what's referred to as the boomers, referred to a baby boom, which occurred after World War II, which corresponds to the largest point of trust in U.S. institutions that this country basically knew on this side of the 20th century, or on this side of World War One. And since then, it's been degrading slowly. And, they're children of that, and to a certain degree, the Xers and some of the older millennials after them have absorbed that perspective. And
that's my wild.
Yeah, sorry, I'm just moving it so you don't spill it.
Oh, you don't want me to spill it on your war figurines.
Okay, well, you lost my train of thought now.
I'm sorry. Boomers.
Well, you asked me what they've essentially moved. I don't know. The thing is, like, you're wondering why there can't be any radical change. There's no radical change because most of the intelligent people in society right now think that what the government's doing is great, and
the government's doing their best. Yeah.
Yeah, and so you don't have any basis for change because it's insane, because what the government's doing is insane. So what you have is a bunch of people who agree that the government are doing the right thing, and then they have, like, some explanation on the side about why everything is crazy. And so far, the most popular explanation for why things are crazy is Republicans. Some of the more radical ones and the younger ones have the explanation of capitalism. But neither of these two villains is going to actually make a difference, because they're all kind of fictions of the imagination of this class. They can't come to terms with the fact that the things that they participate in are seriously corrupt.
Okay.
So
yeah, there we go. Oh, well, someone brought up an interesting question, like why they're like vaccine mandates in schools. We're just backing up a bit. Vaccine mandates in schools have been going on for quite a bit. Flu shots and the MMR vaccine, tetanus. So why is this new vaccine so controversial? Well, it's because I think it's not as effective. It's a completely different kind of vaccine. It's not an attenuated virus. It's an mRNA vaccine. I'm pro-vax. I've been pro-vax my entire life. Had every booster for the measles and the tetanus and the flu shot. I've never had such a bad reaction to any of these than I did to the COVID vaccine.
Yeah, it's
that
definitely
was creepy.
I mean, wouldn't we have I don't know if this is apropos to mention on a live stream, but there was another YouTuber whose wife had the vaccine. People will know this YouTuber because he's a person I frequently endorse on this channel. But his wife had an extreme reaction to the vaccine and was paralyzed. And I don't think it was permanent.
Guillain-Barré syndrome, I think it's called. It's where it attacks your immune system, attacks your nervous system in response to a vaccine. I think I had that, but very mild. I had a bunch of muscle twitches. I had bad vertigo, I had numbness, I had weakness, but it wasn't so bad that I couldn't function. It was just very noticeable. And that was creepy. I've never had that before. So I'm like, sticking this in kids, especially when kids are not, I think measles, mumps, tetanus, diphtheria, that is all very dangerous to children, whereas this COVID is not as dangerous to children, right? So why are we pushing it on children? That's another reason why I think this particular vaccine is so controversial. But I guess we're really off the point. So now,
no, I mean,
let's talk about our future for a little bit now.
Well, no, I mean, I don't know if we really want to talk about like our future.
No, you and me. I mean, we don't need to go into.
And this was to clarify, though.
Yeah, let's talk about the future of the West in terms of COVID and how do you think this is going to go? And
well,
are you worried
just
for yourself?
Aggregate it for.
Are you worried for the children? Well, think of the children.
Well, of course, because you feel the news tighten because you erect all these lines and then they keep on upping the ante, and you're like, okay, so like I erect these moral lines, and so they either break me, or I basically lose a job over a refusal to take a vaccine or refusal to give a vaccine to a kid, and this keeps on going. This is. What's going to happen, and the question is, at what point is there going to be any kind of societal questioning of how we're handling this, other than just to iterate and to do the same thing over again? I don't know, and it can't be disaggregated from social media as well, because we've seen this basically ideological controls are being put on social media hardcore. They already were in 2020, but now there's basically no end in sight. And so what the mainstream media is basically totally consolidated social media in its mainstream form. For instance, the new Twitter CEO, I don't even remember his name, but he has a very thick accent. It's hard to miss. But he established a new policy that is explicitly supposed to ideologically steer the conversation that happens on Twitter. And moreover, they have a policy that you can't post pictures of sort of breaking news events, and unless the mainstream media covers it first. So this basically gives mainstream media sort of the right of first refusal on all news stories, and it's basically they're saying that they're subsuming mainstream social media platforms into the apparatus of the New York Times and CNN and all that stuff. And so, I mean, I guess that can't be disaggregated from this, is that, will this hold? It doesn't appear that this will hold forever.
Well, Twitter will be a hell of a lot less interesting place with this guy in charge.
Yeah, I mean, for someone who's on the right, there's less and less reason to be there. It used to be that it would just consume my attention. And now I have a Twitter account that just echoes my Telegram tweets. I rarely go on there, with one exception. I check R.N. McIntyre's feed very regularly because I find it funny.
Ah.
But R.N. McIntyre basically does the most you possibly can do with a right-wing Twitter account. He posts sarcastic, reactions to the obvious contradictions that are going on.
Yeah.
He retweets a meme every now and again. Mm-hmm. But insofar as sort of, congealing some kind of movement of people and directing them into areas where they can find some kind of way to react to this all, I mean, mainstream modern social media is just not going to be a place for that anymore. Mm-hmm. And so the question is okay, what areas are there to grow? I mean, there's another thing. I mean, probably I wait till this rant until I'm not, speaking over you. But yeah, I keep on reading this. I read Rod Dreher, and he is more of a doomer than I am. He's just a much more of a boomer doomer than I am. Mm-hmm. And he posted a Twitter thread by Malcolm Kayune. He's this black Swedish super based guy. Mm-hmm. It's kind of weird, but he's also a Marxist, so it's a sort of, but he's actually quite based. And of course, all it is just wall-to-wall doom about any kind of reaction on the right to our current situation. And the thing is okay, fine. I mean, I've given these sort of Twitter threads that you can read them and it's sort of doom scrolling, right? You're just getting one more reason to get negative, one more reason to get negative, on, go down. And after reading this, you just say to yourself, okay, I've seen all of this. I know the challenges, but what's next? We still have to live our lives in this world in some authentic way. We still have to go on, and I'm not giving in to this stuff. I mean, other than sort of giving up and giving in to these horrible people who are just destroying everything that's authentic and worthwhile about our society, what really options do you have? And that's what all of these sort of doom scrollers never capture. And I mean, I do it too. I've written, We're Doomed posts on Twitter, and I've made We're Doomed videos on YouTube. But it's not very interesting anymore.
David, I think on a psychological level, people prefer the certainty of doom than the challenge of changing it. And that's why they keep feeding the doom.
Yeah, well, yeah, I guess. I mean, that's
I think so. Yeah, it's like, I think people are so desperate to understand what's going on in the world. They're willing to believe the doom and to go along with it as their reality so that they can have a reality to cling to. It gives them a sense of certainty. Well, I'm just totally psyching out the reason why people do that.
I mean, I think this is, I don't know. I mean, that's a kind of a neat way of putting it, but that's not. I mean, people are reacting. People are reacting to a very, dark situation. I think, right?
Yeah. Again, like I said, what I just said doesn't solve the problem. I'm just saying this. I think that's why people do it.
And people don't have answers.
I mean, it takes much more mental energy to come up with a solution than it does just to find a reality, accept it, and stick with it, right? Again, with your boomer people, they found the reality of the government. They want to stick with it.
Well, no, but they're in a comfortable delusion, right? And that's fine for them, especially if they're retired, right?
Doom is a comfortable delusion for some people, too.
I guess it's not. I don't find it very comfortable. I don't consider myself to be someone who thrives on discomfort and inaction. I'm actually fairly forward-looking. I don't like comforting delusions. I hate that more. So I tend to err on the side of pessimism.
Yeah, but some people see if something good happens in their life, they can't trust it, even when it is truly good. I'm totally going off topic here. Sorry,
I don't know. I mean, we're just saying that. I feel like we're risking kind of getting into Hallmark platitudes, be your best you every day, and you'll always make the best of things. It's sort of like these tautological statements.
Yeah, I know. That's not what I'm saying. I mean, people learn not to trust the good things in their life because in the past it hasn't been a trustworthy thing for them to believe in, right? So people will choose people who are pessimistic, if anything good happens, they simply can't accept it for what it is. They put it within a context of a greater doom, so they don't, savor the moment because there's more comfort in being uncomfortable. This is just a psychological thing, and it's been amplified with
it's bullshit. It's like saying we're actually in a desperate situation, though.
Are we?
Yes.
Okay.
We're basically having our rights and privileges stripped from us one by one by one.
Oh yeah, that's for sure.
Okay, yeah. So you can say you can present this as if this is sort of like a psychological feature of our desire to be complacent, but it's not.
I'm talking about the doomer scrollers or whatever you're calling them.
Yeah, but I see Malcolm and Rod Dreher. I mean, Rod Dreher probably more so because I don't think Rod Dreher has had a positive idea that's been interesting for about 10 years now, and. And he basically writes book after book that's autobiographical, nonsense, and then sort of political hand waving towards these sort of large ideas. Hey, Fritz Imperial's in the chat.
Hey, Fritzy, how you doing?
But for instance, Malcolm is not. He actually is someone who's forward looking, and so is Curtis Yarvin. But I think it's hard to see exactly what's going to materialize. I think the problem is right now is that everyone's waiting to see what happens. Everyone's waiting to see what's going to come over the horizon.
No one likes ambiguous,
We've been in a state of ambiguity for 2 years now.
Yeah, it sucks. It's depressing, actually. I'm personally, I see myself being more nihilistic. To what end? Why am I doing this? Why am I raising a kid? Why am I keeping the home clean? Why am I doing any of this stuff? To what end?
Well, that's
we're
easier.
We're just locked down, right?
Well, when it's coming to raising a kid in a family, that's a little easier. That's just basic, right?
Well, to what end would be making sure my child grows up, to be independent and capable. But what kind of world are we launching him out into, right?
Well, that's the hard one.
That's the thing. It's like, again, to what end? Why am I, I'm not saying, I'm going to like walk away from the family, but like if it looks like there's no real future anymore when our freedoms are being taken away, I'm like, to what end? It's difficult. I'm just saying, day-to-day life is very difficult sometimes when I think too much about what's going on out there. That was a bit personal, but
I don't know. I mean, I think sure, but I think that people are starting to figure out how to live in this new world, and I'm not so sure exactly what the answers are.
I think small pleasures.
But people want something that's more substantial. People want to actually
substantial.
People want to have lives that aren't just constrained into these little boxes that are moved around by.
Everything has been constrained by COVID. Everything we do, from shopping.
Yeah, absolutely.
Shopping, seeing friends, going to a park, everything has been tainted with this. It is exhausting. And it's been 2 fucking years of it.
It's just, and to the end of, the ultimate end of a system that we know is manifestly not acting in our interests, period. Mm-hmm. But, I don't know, we've kind of beaten that subject to death. I think we'll see what happens. I'm seeing some positive developments here and there.
What are you seeing that are positive?
Well, it's difficult because we've recently moved and we've been sick a lot. So,
yeah, we can think.
It feels like kind of we've been forced to be even more concerned than it would ordinarily be.
Yeah.
Another problem is that with the COVID restrictions, they hit sort of the churches hardest because they're the first to lock down, and they don't take any kind of risks with this stuff. So if your main outlet for social life is a church, that's going to be a problem.
I don't think that's been our main social outlet, though.
Well, it hasn't, absolutely. It can't be because there isn't any there, And so I don't know. I think that what's going to eventually happen is people are going to look for something beyond the new COVID reality. Maybe Omicron is going to be something of a turning point, not in so much as it creates an end or a beginning of a new stage of the virus, but just so that like the third time of re-upping this path we've been on causes people to kind of realize that nothing's going to change.
You don't think people get fed up and they will strong arm a change?
Well, who's people? Like if it's the people that are represented by the managerial class, certainly they could. If it's dissidents who are just either too young to have money and influence, or too
disorganized, not disciplined enough. That's a big one. A lot of people have fabulous ideas, but they simply don't have the discipline to carry it out.
Well, but what are you supposed to? There are people who are disciplined, and we were just talking about ourselves. I think it's more than just. I know we're always constantly screaming about whether it's more than just being personally disciplined and organized. I could be as disciplined and organized as possible, and I couldn't move the needle at all
because you don't have the influence.
Because the avenues to do that are all shut down. Mm-hmm. This channel that we're talking on right now, it's going to get a little bigger. But this is not like 2016. In 2016, you could release a video, it could go viral, and you could get 20,000 followers pretty much overnight. Mm-hmm. And even if you weren't a channel that produced viral videos, you could just grow your channel sort of steadily in the face of the fact that people were very dissatisfied with the mainstream media. Now that is over. Mm-hmm. It's either going to stay as bad as it is right now, where all of our channels are all the social media, not just the YouTube channels, all the social media is either being throttled on the mainstream sites or banned on the mainstream sites, or you're being sort of ghettoized in one of these alternative forms. And then once you get rid of social media, what are your avenues? It's either to try to meet people in an environment where nobody meets anymore.
Yeah.
Or try to go through one of these institutions where there's already sort of chaperones in place.
Yeah.
Basically doing institutional gatekeeping for the establishment. Mm-hmm. And the people who are in positions of power or minor positions of power know that dissent will always cost them a job.
Yeah.
So there's no incentive to dissent on that side. And people are right that the institutions have to change. I think that, and I've been thinking about this. I'm going to be going on Millennial. I don't even know if he's given me a date yet. But what I want to talk about is sort of the strengths that we can explore in this new environment. I know I'm being very down in this conversation, but I don't know. I think there are a lot of things we can explore, but I don't think really anyone's gone in that direction yet.
Well, I think we have to do it within our new environment and adapt to this new environment, but not fully, right? Maybe there's a way we can throw weight around while still, being in this new situation. Anyway, what's next? What's next on the
I don't
Doom
know.
agenda?
Well, I think I'm open to any questions. I'm going to be answering questions from the chat probably.
Sure.
As always, guys, you can ask me a question in the question box or in Entropy, or you can send me an Entropy donation. And failing either of those, you can give me an ad distributist heads up, which otherwise I won't be able to see it inside the chat, most likely. So, let's go to the first question. I was listening to you and Fritz on that one stream. I've been wanting. That was the stream I did about. I think that was like the second day I got into my new home. Pretty much, it was right when I moved in. I've been wanting to ask, what are the consequences for canceling Shakespeare? I don't understand what you mean by that. Can you elaborate? So what Fritz said, I don't remember exactly how the conversation came up, but so every time they destroy pieces of art or pieces of media by calling them racist or sexist, and they take them out of circulation, the establishment essentially is giving up a piece of power. And obviously, if they were to call something like H.P. Lovecraft racist, they can do that, obviously. Tolkien being racist, they can do that, obviously. Any of these franchises being racist, sexist, or transphobic, it's basically a given. And of course, they use that to discredit most right-wing ideas that are taken seriously. That's a standard operating procedure for the establishment right now. But what gets kind of really interesting is where they run up against some of these eternal classics. So Shakespeare is obviously, by our standards today, incredibly racist and incredibly sexist, not to mention transphobic. And he is undeniably the master of the English language in so many different ways. And when I was talking to Fritz, I said, well, every few years in progressive areas, there are attempts to cancel Shakespeare in the sense that declare him to be a recognized racist, which by their standards, he obviously is. By most objective standards, in a lot of ways, as long as we're judging people by race, Shakespeare certainly applies. But every single time they try to do this, every time the activists try to do this in a blue area, the cooler heads always come to the fore and shove them in a corner and say, okay, we're not canceling Shakespeare. We're not, shelving all our Kenneth Branagh reenactments and icing the Shakespeare in the Park festivals and firing half our English department. That's not going to happen. Maybe we can put a multicultural spin on Shakespeare for the 300th time, or the 30,000th time since the 80s. And that placates them for a while until the conversation comes up again. And the consequences for canceling Shakespeare is when they cancel Shakespeare, immediately the boomers and all of these PMC folk that we're talking about being the front line for the status quo, that everything is going fine, people, they will immediately realize that this is insane and that they are essentially persona non grata, and they will lose the ability to maintain the illusion of normalcy and the illusion that this extremism is going on in the corner of things. And when they lose the PMC, the professional managerial class, is what keeps them in power. their complacency with the status quo is what makes it so that they don't have to face serious populist opposition of any kind.
Are progressives Puritans?
Yeah, I would say. I mean, the progressives are the obvious ancestors of the Puritans.
Let's just call them Puritans then. The Neo-Puritans. You know?
I'm
Make them
afraid
sound like they're...
Mencius Moldbug beat you to that by about 12 years.
What did he call them?
Originally, he called them Universalists.
Oh.
He called them Neo-Calvinists.
Oh. Am I channeling Moldbug? I don't even read him.
Yeah, well, I mean, you might be catching the mold bug from me. You know?
Yeah, you're just dripping with it.
But it's so the Puritans were the original party of the
no fun people. Yeah.
Well, not just the no fun people, but of the radical egalitarians. They're the ones that unseated the monarchy and smashed all the churches the first time around. And this stuff periodically explodes, and it's always in this direction. It's always more towards the direction of equality, and wouldn't you know it? And this time it's opposed to golden altars in churches and stained glass windows being the barrier towards total human brotherhood. This time it's the English department, the history itself, and all qualitative elements of Western civilization.
Can't we just ship them all to Antarctica or something?
Well, they ship them all to America, and bully
the fucking penguins. I don't.
They shipped them all to America the first time, and that didn't help the problem. They just regrouped and conquered England externally.
Hooray!
So it's so the problem. I mean, the thing is, I think, in many ways, the Puritans won. I mean, they literally won the English Civil War. But in many ways, although ultimately I think someone sitting in the 18th or 19th century would say that, sure, the Puritans won the Civil War, but they were ultimately discredited. I feel like their ideas just kind of went underground and reemerged in a different way. This sort of radical egalitarianism, this time in becoming more dangerous by becoming materialistic. When you have, basically Marx's contribution is taking Christianity and Hegelianism, which are two philosophies that describe spiritual and ideological movements, and radically materializing them. And what you have is sort of a materialization of Hegelian Christianity. That's what we're facing in progressivism. And this unifies with this sort of self-hatred that allows you to get to all of these, basically allows them to unify with third world nationalists. I don't know what that ultimately means. It ultimately means that our leadership class is kind of enthralled by this weird religious preoccupation. I guess people already knew that. Another question by Logos Ex Machina Archive. Roses are red, violets are blue. When will we get a Shrek video from you? Well, I'm working on it. Live streaming every other night hasn't given me more time, and being sick for the better half of 2 months and traveling has not helped either.
Yeah.
I'll try to work on it more. What's your guess, Jake? I think people ask me that just to harass me because I know it irritates me so much.
Okay.
Because
it's fun getting a little rise out of you.
Yeah. So I'm like really low energy tonight. So. Okay, so Jacob for USA $5. What's your guess on how they named the variants after they run out of Greek letters? They're already halfway through.
I had someone ask me that last week.
They could use the Hebrew letters like they do in math. They could call it the Aleph variant.
And then there's always the Cyrillic alphabet.
Yeah, but they have different character names, though, in the Cyrillic alphabet.
Oh.
What's the Cyrillic numeral?
I have no idea. Just start using it. I don't care. I mean, there's plenty of alphabets to go through.
Well, they literally named this one by skipping over the Greek letter that sounds like the name of the Chinese, the chair of the Chinese Communist Party. They skipped over Z because they didn't want it to be like, the Z variant. Or they, yeah. So, that's not going anywhere. Nerve AMV Maker for $20. Does NRX knowledge cripple effective pushback? The only relief from the COOF tyranny has come from delusional boomers going to their court governments and occasionally finding someone who will do something. NRX have regularly advised against such action. The boomer Don Quixote seems to be more helpful than the NRX Paul Atreides. But for every one of those doomer Don Quixotes, these people get permanent criminal records and FBI surveillance. And what is it ultimately accomplishing? Like, for instance, what was more boomer than January 6th? It was like an incredibly boomer affair of we're just going to go out there and pressure people. And now they're all in jail. I mean, go for it. I don't feel it would be responsible for telling you that engaging in these kind of quixotic kicks. How do you pronounce that word? It's the of a nature of Don Quixote. Quixotic. I don't know. I can't pronounce that word. These sort of Don Quixote like butchering the English language. I have the right word in my imagination. I just don't want to pronounce it. These Don Quixote like endeavors where you just tilt at windmills and hope to hit something. I don't know, man. I think they help the establishment a lot more than they do the people that they're attacking. There are some exceptions. The pressure on the whole CRT thing has been, I think that's had some fruits. Mm-hmm. But just, protesting in front of government buildings and doing this boomer stuff like that. Going in front of courts and making a big ruckus. I don't know. That the themes for a young person, the downside for that is just enormous. And we need our young people to not have criminal records and to not be just cut down really, really easily before they even have a chance to shine in a creative fashion. Spiff for USA $30. Howdy, Dave. Been listening through a lot of your videos these past month. I appreciate the wholesome demeanor and approach to talking to people with different opinions. I was a lapsed Catholic, but for the past 5 years, you pushed me into going back to church regularly. Could we ever get a Moldbug interview? Well, I believe I mailed Moldbug and I never got a response. I figured that was because my most popular video is my video on him. And Moldbug very famously does not like interviewing people who are prominent commentators of his work in advance. He doesn't like the dynamic, and I can't blame him. On the other hand, however, Academic Agent has had a Moldbug interview, and I believe that's going to be posted on his channel this Carlisle Day, which is December 4th, which is this Saturday. And I'm trying to carve out a time where I might be able to appear on the stream with Academic Agent and people, although I don't think Moldbug's going to be on that stream. Maybe. But I have to negotiate it around other family commitments on Saturdays, so we'll see. I people ask me about the Moldbug interview a lot. I'd like to, but I mean, is he gonna... Moldbug is sort of like a ride from Disneyland. He has this very particular circuitous route he goes through his ideas. It always kind of ends in the same place. It hits the same notes. And he always talks about Hitler Lives, right? It's like the first part of the ride. You have to get through the Hitler Lives exhibit before you go on to the hippopotamus and the crocodiles on the jungle, the Moldbug jungle adventure, right? Did they still have the jungle river ride adventure at Disneyland? Oh, you've never been to Disneyland? I've never been to Disneyland. No. Oh, shoot. Oh, man. All these things we were planning to do in California when we lived there and we never got a chance to do because of COVID. Yeah. But I don't know. If I were just sitting in the background nodding my head while, he told me about Hitler Lives for, the 40th time, then I don't know. Is it going to be that much of a value to people? I want to actually see if I can't be a big value to people. And so I don't know, I'm thinking more along the lines of interviewing some of these post-leftist types that are kind of coming to the fore. Some of them are still really cringe, and they harbor a lot of boomer tendencies, but I don't know. At the same time, they offer a possibility of something more than the path we've been on currently. No, I'm not a total pessimist. I'm very optimistic about the prospects of seeing something new. I'm just, in my own life, it's a little bit grating because I know it's going to be, in the span of my own lifetime, probably a little bit of a wait.
This is like Groundhog Day from hell.
Oh yeah, that's exactly it. Every day is kind of the same, and nothing can ever move forward.
The same constraints. Yeah.
I mean, this is another thing. Like, the news never is about anything relevant. It's all about bullshit.
And fear.
Yeah, I mean, I was like, what are they talking about on CNN now? Is it anything relevant? Let's just see. Oh, it's the new testing requirements that are going to take effect Monday in the U.S. I mean, I guess that's real news, but so much of the stuff that they cover is real news. It's contrived news. It's the government reacting to its own press release. But I guess at least it's relevant. But so much stuff in the news it's just all bullshit. It's just all stuff that's irrelevant, like the January 6th stuff. People actually follow this and believe it. And I can't believe that people actually take this seriously. If the left was still talking about us, I would tell right-wingers to constantly keep a dialogue open to the left. Okay, well, I'm going to let... A few minutes? Okay.
Give me 5 more minutes, and then I think I'm going to go play Skyrim, okay?
Okay. I can sympathize. But...
yeah, this is kind of depressing me, so...
Oh, well, I have a lot of stuff to talk about that if I had more time to prepare a talk, I would have done a proper distance stream. I would have actually had like a little spiel that I could go through and hit points.
Yeah, but when you have your wife on, you know you're in trouble.
Well, I didn't want to do more. I'm going to do a live stream. You can play Skyrim. It feels very
well, thank you for including me, David.
Yeah, I guess have your second talk over you.
Yeah. Dave, I think we're doing... Well, actually...
I want to welcome you to voice opinions.
Yeah, well, that's why I wanted us to do videos so people will actually know I'm still here.
Well, yeah, but then I'd actually have to, look good.
Oh, yeah, screw that. No,
and,
not worth the effort, no.
Yeah, I mean, I look really tired right now.
But I lost almost 30 pounds this year.
Yeah, I think I was business traveling for 3 weeks in November. For most of November, I was away on business, like a few days back during the weekend, then right back to business travel. And I think I put on some weight because every day you're eating out. Every breakfast, lunch, and dinner, you're eating out, plus airport meals.
Plus sitting in conferences.
Plus you're sitting in meetings all day long. And it's just oof. Yeah, that's just not a good lifestyle. The thing was, you ever watch that movie Up in the Air with George Clooney about the guy that's always traveling for business?
Yeah, I've seen that.
Yeah, the most unrealistic. I mean, he would be like Chris Christie size if he were doing that, right?
Yeah.
Or maybe he's the only guy who actually uses gyms in hotels.
Yeah, maybe.
Of course, because of COVID, all the gyms and hotels now are closed, right? So.
Yeah. Okay, well, on that note, I think I'm going to go.
All right.
Well, yeah, I have some ironing to do as well.
Okay, well, I will hold down the fort, and I will answer these people's good questions, and then, I'm not as high energy as I usually am for distance streams, so my apologies.
You're doing fine. You need anything? Just shoot me a text.
Okay.
All right, bye-bye. Thanks for having me.
Right. Okay, guys. Thanks for your patience, and thank you, Catholic Wench, for coming on.
Thanks for your patience until I got off.
Anyway, yeah, again, I wanted to do a live stream. I just didn't have a lot of this stuff, but people complaining about me not producing videos. It's just me not having as much time as I thought I did, not having as much energy. Work kicks up. You come back tired. You can't do hard intellectual projects. The videos I have made, this is another thing, it's also really, really easy to make a video where you're talking to somebody. Like you have a person you're talking to. And it's harder to make videos that are on an abstract topic. And it's also easier to make videos where you're angry about something because it's on your mind and you just spit it into the microphone right away. There's no hesitation in your demeanor. There's no, let me check my notes from 2 years ago. I had an outline and I have to say this here and not that there. That's just a nightmare. And especially if you're tired, it just takes you exponentially more time than just spitting an idea you have into the microphone. Yeah, so I haven't been making videos for that. And also I say yes to a lot of people. I think I was on 3 live streams on various different channels over the last 5 days since I've gotten back from traveling. I've done a lot of live streams, so I don't feel like I have been producing no content, especially if you consider those live stream appearances. Okay, let's go on to the next question here. Thank you very much, Spiffay. I'll go on to the next question. Numbtooth bum. Oh, and also, God be praised for coming back to the church and church attendance. Actually, during this time, I've been making a point of trying to read the Bible more. Very uncharacteristic of a Catholic, but I've been falling in love with the Old Testament. Really, it just the Psalms and the books of Samuel and Kings just seem so relevant to the point of history we are right now. To see God as sort of this active political entity, and to understand what sort of material calls for justice actually mean. It really, I really encourage people, Christians kind of, a lot of Christians, and myself included, often poo-poo the Old Testament, and its power as literature is, if not for its spiritual content, is just cannot be understated. And its ability to kind of actually speak to the type of deep politically existential problems we're finding ourselves in, it cannot be understated. Yeah, so in related news, also, I saw recently that Aiden Paladin has converted to Christianity, which is really interesting. I feel like that's been a long time coming, but I'm glad to see it finally take effect and actually result in somebody who's ready to follow a distinct path. I mean, maybe that's going to be how society is. Maybe we're all sort of on the Aiden Paladin road, where we're going to exhaust all possible options other than doing the right thing, other than actually making a hard dedication to living life and making hard sacrifices and rediscovering real spirituality. And that's just the path we're on. And this COVID thing is just us burning off excuses. Right now, the excuse that we're all burning off is lethargy. It's just so easy to not do anything because all they want from you is to not do anything. But we're just getting a downgraded life in place of the life we should be living. Numbtooth bum for USA $12. If the government granted protections and incentives for family, how do you think extended families would develop? Are there any practical policies that we could advocate for that would advance this agenda? Well, the first thing is that in order to recognize families, the government would have to be able to define families. And the difficulty, I mean, the problem is that you're just talking about going in the exact opposite direction than we're going to currently. I'm not interested in just any group of people that lives together and wants to cash in on a series of benefits. What I'm interested in is intact heterosexual families that are at least attempting to continue a biological strain of the human race and their extended relatives. That's the structure that needs to be encouraged. We can include some exceptions on the side, but once you push those exceptions into an actual pathway to make the exceptions be the rule themselves, then it's just over, which is why gay marriage sort of blew up any notion that we'd be able to target the heterosexual family as an organizing principle we base society on. And it's only getting worse now that we're trying to just, deconstruct everything. There's no way that a society that can't tell me what a woman is can tell me what a family is. So, I mean, there's one big obstacle right there. I mean, the problem with all of these sort of policy recommendations is that it's so easy to talk about what the government should be doing. But then the rejoinder is, oh, well, in the status quo, that would be totally politically impossible. Well, yes, but it's what we need to do. So, what do you want me to say? The only thing politically possible right now is to keep on doing exactly what we're doing. Because the government's nuked all other political options that are at all workable. So the only thing you can practically work for is a radical change in how government approaches policies and conceptualizes policies in the modern world and in the modern West. And before that, it's all going to be kind of dreams. It's all going to be castles in the sky and spires in the clouds, so to speak. But, I mentioned this on my last video. I mean, it's really easy. You want to have an earned income family tax credit that extends for heterosexual intact families and that scales with the number of children that they have. And you also want to have an incredibly generous jobs program. And you want to boost wages by creating jobs at a minimum government wage rather than just giving out a minimum income. That government wage for a guaranteed job, or not necessarily guaranteed, but almost certainly guaranteed job, and with some abusive exceptions, obviously notwithstanding, that will naturally boost the wages of workers if it's also combined with an ability to restrict trade and labor so that global techno-capital just doesn't get rock-bottom labor prices everywhere and always. And I think those two things as sort of a first step would be really, really good. I mean, you could think of pretty much infinite policies that would do this. Here's another one that I didn't mention on the Sitchin Adam stream. Just prohibit these sort of tax haven loopholes like Silicon Valley, where the state taxes private citizens to hell and back so that it can give insane corporate tax breaks for people who create their corporate parks in places like Santa Clara or San Jose or Palo Alto. All of American jobs are basically being created in one geographic area. And it's creating, and this is a phenomenon that's frequently discussed on the right wing, but it's basically feeding this gigantic IQ shredder that's simultaneously making our PMC class incredibly aloof from all other issues pertaining to ordinary people, while at the same time massively financially destabilizing and impoverishing the rest of the country who does not participate in any meaningful way in global trade. I mean, that's. I mean, you could just think of infinite policies like this. How about funding for organizations that actually have a family-friendly component to them? That would be amazing. There's so few outlets for people who. There's so few outlets for people who want to do things in the real world, who aren't who have children. Our entire social life, and this is things that Angela Nagel brought up, our entire social life is organized around single people and in pitching social activities to their needs. There is a troll vendor in my chat that I need to get rid of. I'm sorry. I need to report this person. This is just absolutely atrocious. I hate these bots. As the Twitter policies towards dissident thought gets up, the bots only get worse. Yeah, so it's like all progressive policies, right? So, I mean, pro-natalist policies are just generally good ideas. I mean, pro-natalist policies, they're just like standard good government. Because people who raise children, most of their disposable income is going into paying the benefits of people who aren't having children. ContraPoints makes 6-figure salaries on a YouTube channel that they don't upload to. And yet all of the money I make from my, 9-hour to 10-hour a day job, usually more like 10, then almost all the money goes into, or almost all the money after like rent and stuff, goes into raising a family that will pay for the entitlement programs of people like ContraPoints who have no children. It's just, I mean, so when you think about it, pro-natalist policies, it's not even a question of liking families. It's just good governments. And yes, I'm going to make Charlemagne a mod here. You are a mod. I'll make Fritz Imperial a mod. Here, Iron Duke, you can be a mod too. I am noticing regulars. I'll make you all mods. If you can ban people out of my chat, please do. I just hate these bots. Okay. So Sam153 for USA $10. Hey Dave, always love hearing your discussions and opinions. We're all in this COVID nonsense for the long haul. Are the current trends... Oh, I'm sorry. I skipped one. Okay, sorry. Aristocratic Owl for USA $3. What are your thoughts on neo-folk music such as Death in June, Current 93, Rome, or Blood and Sun? I listened to Death in June and I really like them. But to be quite honest, the neo-folk music just really hasn't been my scene. Other than sort of like period music like classical and jazz that I kind of listen to in a very mood basis, and sacred music as well. I really have two guilty pleasures. There aren't like, I should say there's a few genres. There are the great musics, right? Which are classical, jazz, and some holy music, right? Both folk and classical. And I listen to those basically when I'm only listening to those on a mood basis. You can't listen to jazz when you're not in the jazz mood. It's impossible. Don't try it. You have to be in a certain contemplative mood to even do it. It's not background music. But when it comes to the actual Dave musics that are Dave music through and through, I should say, like all millennials, I listen to like synthwave music in the background when I'm working just to like get a groove when you're programming, right? But as for my actual music genres that sort of are me as a person through and through, the two ones are sort of neo bluegrass, which is just sort of, it's this folk music with cellos and usually more heartfelt and usually more gothic. A good example of this style of music is Crooked Still, but there are a variety of bands that do that kind of music. And then the other one is shoegazer, which I absolutely love. I just love the wall of sound, grainy guitars, the My Bloody Valentines, the Silversong pickups. Obviously, the alternative band that picked the most from shoegazer music, the Smashing Pumpkins. Although they were much more standard alternative, and you can go down the line for much more obscure fare from there. I love this genre. And those were really my things. And I listened to Death in June as more of a novelty. I'm aware that Death in June was always widely rumored to have nationalist and far-right sympathies. And to my knowledge, they never made them explicit. But I can't say that I was really into them. And they never really were my scene because I never understood... Like a lot of European music, I never understood really what their message or what am I supposed to, what period of time, what scene am I supposed to be imagining when I listen to this music. When I listen to bluegrass music, what I'm sort of tapping into is sort of this deep-seated, deep-rooted Americana, which is incredibly tragic and incredibly grotesque. Kind of the spirit you'd find in something like a Flannery O'Connor, or a novel like a novel of Graham Greene, perhaps, or any of the Southern Gothic writers. Although Graham Greene was not Southern Gothic, I'm kind of blanking on the other ones. Cormac McCarthy might be a good example of that as well. Although I don't think he's a true example of Southern Gothic either. He's certainly adjacent. But when I think of when I listen to sort of the Gothic bluegrass, that's always sort of the image that comes into my mind. The deep Americana, the country, the soul that inhabits that country, and its travails both in the past and also presently. When I listen to shoegazer, I think of the world that I grew up in, the sort of angsty world of late modernity, of late modernism, where Americana is still present and interfacing with a youth that are sort of striving against it, striving for a more authentic existence. This is always the problem with rock and roll, is that, now looking back on this, when you look at something like Kurt Cobain or even the Smashing Pumpkins, they're rebelling against a element of American normalcy that in many ways is already dead. And it's hard to listen to that in a lot of ways because you know that the rebellion is phony. Insofar as that has a political nature, all they're desiring is to be where we are currently. With, congratulations, you deconstructed the suburbs. They no longer exist. American normalcy is dead. Don't you feel so much more authentic and alive right now than you did in 1991 or 1984 or 1974 even? Well, of course, nobody does. Everyone feels like they're detached spiritually from any kind of life, and that's just the affliction we struggle under. We're in many ways more angsty now. However, when I listen to shoegazer, and even when I listen to things like Kurt Cobain, the element of truth in that music is where they're yearning for some kind of more authentic existence. of all of the characters that kind of, obviously the shoegazer and stuff, people like My Bloody Valentine and Billy Corgan, these people, spirituality is just a very, very large part of the background noise of that rock and roll music, of that particular genre of rock and roll. But it's kind of there in things like Pearl Jam and Nirvana to a much less lower extent. I always think of this character, Frances Farmer. There's a song that I used to like of Nirvana is called Frances Farmer Will Have Her Revenge on Seattle. And Frances Farmer was an actress who, I believe she had a horribly sort of decadent life in the 30s. And then she had a nervous breakdown somewhere through that decadent life as an actress. And she was sent to a mental facility where they gave her just horrific electrical shocks, and she never recovered from that. But I believe that later in life, when she was an older woman, and she's sort of famous for being a victim of this, the late end of the electroshock therapy craze. That's probably why Kurt Cobain featured her as someone who'd have her revenge on Seattle. She was a Seattle native. But very late in her life, she had this sort of very amazing conversion to Christianity, where indeed I think she even had visions. The kind of the conversion story you hear about and never believe is really real. And it's sort of a minor part of the story, but it's also the one that I kind of think of more and more when I hear that song, that I think that, okay, yeah, this is like pure nihilism. This is pure rage. But behind sort of the rage of Frances Farmer, who's this person who's supposed to be angry at the system for foisting this sort of phony medical procedure on her, there's this yearning, there's this answer to the rage that comes in the form of spirituality. And it's also in the background of Kurt Cobain's song too. People didn't like Kurt Cobain because he was soulless. And externally, he was purely nihilistic. But there's a soul behind it too. It's just obscured. It's just the subtext. So, I don't know. I want to kind of comment on that. You get me talking about music, I'll talk your ear off about music. So thank you, Aristocratic Owl. Sam153 for USA $10. Hey Dave, I always love hearing your discussions and opinions. If we're all in this COVID nonsense for the long haul, are the current trends of movement from lockdown states to freer states going to increase? Where will these court challenges to mandates go? Well, this is always the problem, because you get the sense that this is hurting the establishment to a certain extent. But since they're consolidating political power, they'll always take the financial loss. The deal of the Democratic Party since the end of World War II is we will always take a financial loss to our institutions as long as we get more of the share of political power. It's like that famous quote from Other People's Money. Once your business model is getting an increasing share of a declining market, you're going down the tubes. Well, sure, but that's been the Democratic Party's strategy, or the cathedral strategy, since World War II. Or really since the late 70s, when America kind of kicked into its decline phase very slowly. And it's worked great for them. But now they have all these trends like inflation and urban decay, which is kicked into high gear, and white flight, as people call it, which is kicked into high gear as well. You have all of these vectors of decay that are going on. And really, it's hard to say. The Democratic politicians haven't been trained to be concerned with this stuff. But it is hurting them. It is hurting them a lot. And it's just hard to see, when that pain is when the bill's actually going to come due. Because they can kind of delude themselves indefinitely with more and more political power. I hear people talking about bluegrass in the chat. Yeah, guys, if you want recommendations for bluegrass, it's a deep genre. I think it's really taken a downswing recently because of the fact that I think the scene's been horribly politicized, like most things in America. And the real strength of bluegrass was that it was thoroughly sort of a purple area. It was something that both blue staters and red staters both participated in. And now, of course, that space is just totally smashed. So, we'll see. But there's just a lot of good people. Mind's Eye for USA $5. Have you heard the aesthetic competition that Lomez has put together? Molbug is judging the poetry section, so why not take a stab at it for a good laugh? I have heard about that. I didn't really pay attention to the deadline, so I figured I wouldn't possibly be eligible for that this time around, just because the timing is really bad. I'm just tired all the time, But that sounds like a really fun thing to do. Me writing poetry, though, what could be more cringe? It's just, you have to have such a light touch as a poet. It's just such a hard thing to do. Because in poetry, the danger is always to come off heavy-handed. I don't know how people in the 18th century, I think it was just a more sincere time, but they wrote like really heavy-handed stuff. Like, to maidens to make much of time, like gather your rosebuds while ye may. I mean, imagine writing something like that these days. It's impossible to imagine. Yeah, so Iron Duke points out that my wife is musical. She actually is composing hymns for people. Her requests come from a lot of older people, so they tend the poetry they request and the music they like tends to be very sentimental. It's not something. I mean, I think people would like our generation would like more solemn and contemplative music. But, that's not going to appeal to 60 or 70-year-olds. They want stuff that's very, what people in their 60s and 70s like. Very sentimental, very laying it on thick. But I really like the fact that she's taken this opportunity to follow her passion and to write music for audiences. Okay, some katakana name that at one point in my life when I was taking Japanese I could pronounce, but I don't want to try it at 10 o'clock at night when I am this tired. Katakana is one of the Japanese phonetic alphabets. For USA $5, he says, I've noticed the mental health effects of COVID have been really hard on my peers in the college age range. Everyone has been sucked into some weird leftist ideology. But is there anything someone like me can do to help, especially among young women? Number one thing you can do, bring them back to reality. Leftism thrives on disconnection. It thrives on things in theory. The grill pill is the red pill. Once you bring them back to reality and to things that are real and share things with that you're passionate about, if you're a young man, and I assume you're a young man, the best thing you can do with women is to demonstrate that you're passionate about something outside of yourself. Ultimately, what women want is they want you to demonstrate that you're passionate about them. But if you say that explicitly, it's like poetry, right? It almost always is creepy. So, in lieu of that, the most interesting thing you can do is to be very passionate, very involved, and competent in something that's outside of yourself. If you're looking to get people out of leftist ideology, just think of Conquest's first and second law. Everyone is conservative, everyone is right-wing about the things that they truly love. Teach people to sincerely love something that's not some iteration of self-promotion, and you will have given someone a seed through which they can become healthy and right-wing. But increasingly being healthy and right-wing is the same thing. By which I mean being healthy and not left-wing, really. There are lots of healthy people who don't consider themselves right-wing. But increasingly, most people who consider themselves left-wing are struggling with some pretty large psychological limitations or psychological maladies. I don't know. I mean, let's think about this. Book groups are really, I don't know, young people probably don't do this, but book groups are really good. Trips outdoors are really, really good. Again, people don't do this, but concerts. I'm just going through my things that I used to do. Like playing board games, really, and getting really involved in a few board games. I've always found it's better to be really involved in a few board games than to sort of be a board game sampler. Board game sampling is fun, and I've done it a long time, but the problem is it's hard to kind of control that. It oftentimes can be like, a good thing to meet people doing is just going to a general board game night and sampling. But then you're really learning the rules collectively with other people. And really the most thing you're doing, you're not really trying to win, you're trying to meet people. Going outdoors, outdoor adventures is always good. Again, all of these things are things that like COVID has basically destroyed. Yeah, I mean, how do people date? This is another question I have no experience with. How do people... The thing is, the encouraging psychological health for young people out there, right? If you're a younger guy and you want... What's so funny is what you want to facilitate more than anything else is just being a guy that can have a very good time doing something. Like, this is the guy who can organize a great hike. This is a guy who can have, like, a really interesting party and not one where everyone is falling down drunk. This is a guy who finds, like, tickets to that great concert. We never knew we liked this group. He has all of these good insights into what we can see. It's that kind of thing that that people really, really thrive on. And that's what makes you sort of a force of that gets you a lot of friends who are the same sex as you, but it's also what makes you good at meeting the opposite sex. And it's sort of funny because it's just all it is being psychologically and socially healthy, and that's what people need more than anything else. And it's entirely innocent, right? All you're trying to do is just make people be the best versions of themselves possible. You just want to, that's what you're really helping people to be, and you're making yourself more interesting at the same time. I don't know how much of that's available during COVID because it's not that we're locked away. Anyone can go out and flaunt the mask mandates. That's not the issue. The issue is that everyone's encouraged to be at home constantly, and everyone's encouraged to be lazy. And so now people who don't want to get out and meet people have a natural excuse not to do that. And one of the things that was always good was that everyone before COVID knew that they really should go out to that concert. They really should be social. They really should go to church in person rather than watching it on YouTube. They really should go to that volunteering event. And of course, when they woke up at 8 a.m. to go on the hike, or 7 a.m., to do the volunteering activity, or maybe they didn't watch videos and they actually went to a concert that they didn't know they would like. They might eventually understand that was a life-expanding experience, but they didn't want to do that at the time. We're millennials. We're all homebodies here, right? I don't know. I mean, I can tell you what people want to do, but now there's an additional excuse because now all the boomers are telling them, join us in our retirement. Let us entomb you in our own retirement. Maybe boomers will graduate from that to let us entomb you in our own actual literal graves at some point. But I don't know. I would be thinking in that direction if I were a younger person. It's just what is available and what people are actually... I mean, what are people doing that's not online? And if it is online, how can you replicate real life as much as possible? Bible readings in Discord or actual book groups in Discord or other social media platforms probably are closer, or they're as close as I've ever gone to a healthy activity online. But you're not going to actually increase people's health hanging around shit posting on a Discord server, reacting to memes or playing video games. That's the most unhealthy thing. It's just everyone trying to distract each other continuously forever. That's just drinking salt water at that stage. Aristocratic Owl for USA $3. Do you think there is a space for small literary groups to dive into literature to help spearhead a new mythology? Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Are you talking about reading or are you talking about writing? I think there's a space for both of them. It's sort of funny. I've been reading a lot more, and a few years ago when I had no time for reading, people were forwarding me all this literature stuff, and now no one has. Someone says chess is good, actual chess. Yeah, actually, I have a colleague who is a grandmaster chess player, and I've been trying to get better at chess. And people have proposed a chess tournament. And I'd always that would be so much fun if we could have every person who attends the Millennial Gathering have a single elimination sort of March Madness chess tournament. I wonder if you just took the entire lineup of Millennial and forced them to play chess together. I don't care how bad you are. And just see who actually wins out as the best chess player. That would be hilarious. No shame for losing, because I probably would be the first person eliminated because I suck. But that would be absolutely really interesting. But as for literary stuff, I can't emphasize how much I like the idea of reading with a group. It will keep you honest. It will keep you on track. I have 3 books that I'm reading in tandem right now. I have the Bible, the Book of Samuel, and next the Book of Kings, interlaced with Psalms that I'm reading every night. I have Spengler's Decline and Fall. I'm trying to finish that book. That's slow going because it's heady, and it's not the Bible, so I'm not obliged to read it. And then I have the guilty pleasure, which is the Horus Heresy Warhammer books, which is my I'm too tired from work, I just had to tap out and do something completely mindless. I'll turn it on. But I have to say that series really dropped off after the first 4 books. This is utter bullshit, but the first book was oh man, this is actually kind of well written. They've got a very tragic Shakespearean dimension going, and it just sort of degrades into treading water. As Morgoth would put it, you have all of these incredibly interesting dynamics going on between these Nietzschean supermen who are also sort of Catholic monks on the side. And they're fighting this epic battle with demons and living saints and warp creatures and bending time, and it's so epic. And they spend chapters talking about the psychic grenades and how they're produced, and you're just who cares? But it's easily digested trash. But that being said, I'm just from a pure literary enjoyment point of view. Dude, the Old Testament, metal. This stuff is, it's just read it unironically. It was a little bit embarrassing, I think, as a new Christian reading the New Testament, because there's always ridiculous stuff. In the Book of Samuel, there's a plague of hemorrhoids, and then there's a tribe of people who over to sacrifice to overcome the hemorrhoids make golden hemorrhoids. And you're thinking, what the hell is a golden hemorrhoid? And it's literally in the Bible. You can read it. But that stuff matters less. That stuff matters less because the struggles are just so epic, and people are just so unironic. And people are so unironically wicked. And there's a sense of justice and a thirst for justice and a sincerity in the entire affair. And it just all the sort of weird things that are obviously a product of something that we don't understand anymore. When you're really engaged with what's going on and the stakes of what's going on, these people are fighting for their people and their people's ability to survive and carry forward and not be degenerated into just nothingness. Their struggle is our struggle in a very, very real way. So, I'm going to eliminate this picture, right? I don't need this picture. Oops, that's the wrong one. What is it? This picture? Oh, there we go. Yeah, I don't need that anymore. Yeah, but I'm just saying, in my advice again, don't sit down and read the Bible. Sit down and go, I am here to read the Book of Samuel. I'm here to read the Book of Acts. I'm here to read, the Book of Acts is a great example because the most recent stream I was doing was on science fiction, on The Matrix. And the Philip K. Dick, he was obsessed with the Book of Acts. That particular book, he believed that, archetypes from that New Testament narration of the apostles are essentially playing themselves out on repeat in our present lives, and we're kind of puncturing through the veil to experience this reality where Christ is imminent and the resurrection is coming. But yeah, look at it with post-COVID eyes, at least for myself, revolutionary. Ecclesiastes is another great example of a book that's just like metal. It translates well into our time. Unism, for instance, did an excellent creative reading of that. I listened to that. I loved every second of it. And I loved his creative reading of it. To be quite honest, you could probably do like 5 more, and each of them would have different ways of interpreting it. Like, these things have to be sort of lived and sung in your mind in order to be really impactful. Okay, going on, Nerve AMV Maker for USA $3. I think it should be noted that the major NRXers like Molebug were on the lockdown bandwagon. Keith Woods did a whole video attacking the Republican boomer type for being skeptical about the COOF. Well, I mean, what do you got? This is what I'm saying. Like, what are you going to do about this? I mean, guys, I mean, I hate to break this to you. This is sort of, I'm a Nerve AMV Maker. I love you, and you see you on the channel all the time, and you have great questions. But I know it's bad for him to criticize the question, but I feel that this question kind of exhibits a boomer mentality. Like, you're criticizing these NRXers like they are professional sociologists, like they're professional scientists, like they're the embodiment of a cathedral. Like, they're supposed to be the representatives of a system that has all the answers. They're not. They're dissidents. You're taking in this information that's highly uncertain. This data is highly uncertain, and then you're mixing it in with all of the lies and the propaganda that you get from the mainstream media and the mainstream university. So it's a nice big slop, and you can't determine who you're supposed to trust, who are the honest scientists and who are the politically compromised ones. And you have to pick out the truth from the falsehood. And we're holding them to the standards that you might hold a university to. There's no way that once everything is said and done, once everything is revealed, that everyone is not going to be wrong about a whole hell of a lot of things. Now, the government has no right to be as wrong as it's consistently been over the course of this pandemic. They have no right because they're the government. They're not dealing with self-imposed noise from government propaganda. So they should be able to do a very, very sober reading of the statistics. And to the extent that they're not, they're just corrupt. They're being corrupted by their own political interests. They're believing their own bullshit. Or they are literally lying to us in the form of propaganda. But no other thinker who ventures forth an opinion is going to be right. They're going to be wrong about half the stuff. And that's the thing. That's why I very much caution people on fighting the cathedral on this too loud publicly. Because if they're going to come back and they're going to find all the posts where you were wrong, and they're going to try to destroy your credibility based on those posts. To my mind, nobody who's not an official source or part of the mainstream media should be morally judged for being wrong on this topic. Pardon me. Dropped a pen. Nobody should be judged for that because nobody is in a position of having a good handle on the evidence. If we play this game over, he had the wrong take, he made the wrong decision, he evaluated I should be highlighting these super chats while I'm reading them off, and I'm not. I can't believe this. I'm sorry. Is this even working? It's not working. Who knows? I should really sort out my boomer problems. But this is a sunset stream. I'll do that for the next the next actual Distant stream. I don't know. I just this game we play where we throw people overboard for being wrong. dissidents should be more careful about making prognostications on uncertain topics. We should always hedge our bets because it's not our job to be the replacement for Fauci, because we can't be. They won't even let us. Not that randos on the internet should be allowed to become the spearhead for reactions against medical emergencies. But what we can't do like this purity test of like, oh, well, he was wrong on COVID. How could you not be at this stage? Takar USA $3. Curious to hear your thoughts on the future of Islam in the U.S. Well, I mean, there's going to be more Muslims in the West, that's for sure, because the birth rate in Muslim countries is for the time being higher. And it will be for about 20 more years before the birth rate from the Middle East is completely swamped by the birth rate from sub-Saharan Africa. And in that time, I imagine the percentage of Muslims will increase. Right now, though, they're all being funneled into areas of the country where they're going to be immediately subsumed into cathedralism. And their leaders are all being trained by progressives to become basically progressive infiltrators against the very religion they represent. I mean, in some sense, I find them as fellow people who are struggling against the corrosive effects of modernity. So I don't really consider Islam to be an enemy. They're certainly a rival. And after we fix, in the event, God willing, that we unseat sort of the godless, nihilistic, degenerative forces that are just tearing apart our people, there probably will be a struggle over who controls what territory with Muslims that are currently in the West. I think this can be done peacefully. But really, to quote Akira Kurosawa, when you're about to get your head cut off, you stop worrying about losing your beard. Or when you're about to lose your head, you stop worrying about your beard. And really the danger is just us being destroyed. And this danger comes mostly from progressives and not from rival religions. The major rival religion in this country is progressivism. And it's gone from being sort of optimistic and naive to being vindictive, demonic, and puritanical. In the space of 10 years, it's made that transformation. It's utterly horrifying to look at what it does to people. So, I don't know. Yeah, that's all I have to say. Islam's too big of a topic. I'm it's going to get bigger. It's probably not going to get much bigger in the West. The struggle of the West right now is the struggle between traditional people and the cathedral. And the question is whether the cathedral's influence can be unseated. And really, no questions about religious rivals are meaningful beyond that central struggle against the mainstream. They're all questions for a future time period. And they probably will be resolved in space. They probably will be resolved through sort of friendly boundaries. Do this here or not here, so on and so forth. The kind of rational compromises humans, or reasonable humans, are very, very capable of making as the necessary price for peace. And that we've only been stopped from making by this insane religious cult that's taken over virtually all countries in the modern world, called progressivism. Okay, Sam 153 for USA $5. Left field question: how god awful will the Lord of the Rings series be? He's talking about the Amazon Lord of the Rings series. I feel that serials died with the crashing and burning of Game of Thrones. Well, yes, you're absolutely right. I think I made this is my reaction to the original Game of Thrones, which was that the ending of Game of Thrones is really the dying of the golden age of television. The golden age of television started with The Sopranos, and I think it ended with Game of Thrones. I think Game of Thrones was the last golden age of television show. All the others, it's not just Lord of the Rings, it's all the other serials that I see coming out periodically, especially post-COVID. They've just been the most anodyne shit imaginable. I remember seeing, my wife was a big Dark Crystal Jim Henson fan, and so we watched the reboot of the Dark Crystal. The Muppets were good. They did a good job on the Muppets. Other than that, that was just complete wall-to-wall shit. There's this. The plot was just millennial fanfic posturing, Manichean garbage, and it comes from. I mean, obviously, people will say, "I'll go back to the original Jim Henson one from what was it, 1978," and it literally has voiceover narration. It's just a good versus evil story with worse Muppets. Well, the world was sort of the star of that. It was sort of the star, was the world, and was the puppetry, and was the creative imagery, and the art, all of which is derivative in the remake. And then secondly, there is something to be said for being unabashedly straightforward. Why is Conan the Barbarian so much more tolerable than 90% of the fantasy that comes out now? It's because it's so stupid. I mean, it's not entirely stupid, but a lot of it is stupid. A lot of this pulp stuff is pretty stupid, but it's just it's sort of sincere. Razorfist was right. There was this sort of pulp craze in the right before the Great Awakening, around 2010, 2011. There was this return of the exploitation movie. Think the movie that comes to mind most frequently in this genre is like Hobo with a Shotgun, and Razorfist was right. The reason why they're not very good, and then was Kung Fury was another one of these things. The reason why they're not as fun is that they're all parodies, and when they're not parodies, they're kind of winking towards the camera. What made the original pulp novels fun was that they were sincere, and they came from an age where you could believe in that sincerity at least a little bit. And because of that, they had more promise. We're too cynical to believe in that these days, and so either these things have to be, very sincere. They have to hit you sort of at the same level that the Old Testament does, or they have to be constantly winking at the camera. And once you're winking at the camera, I'm going to start looking at your plot with a little bit more of a critical eye. And then I'm going to realize that it has the maturity level of a 13-year-old girl's fan fiction, like most modern serials do. And then, I'm tapped out, right? Like, I'm no longer consuming this as someone who's actually interested. I'm consuming this in this sort of meta, time-wasty way. I think this is what's going to happen with Warhammer 40k, too. I mean, this is something I'm going to... I'm probably never going to reach 40k subscribers, but when I do, I was going to do a live stream with Morgoth where we just geeked out about the 40k universe. It's one of these goofy pulp universes that men like because it's super manly and all that stuff. It's Conan the Barbarian in space. But what's so funny is that the company that produces it's trying to go woke. And they've got a big problem. Right, they've got a big problem. What's so funny about this is they can't properly corrupt their own material. They want so hard to corrupt their material by wokeness, but they can't because they've got themselves into a bind. They've got themselves into a catch-22 because they developed the plot enough and for long enough to establish that the main sort of good guy faction, the Imperium of Man, is like thoroughly right-wing. They're basically Catholic space Nazis, right? Okay, so that's fine, right? Because what they want to go is they want to go like, oh, this is a satire. This is a satire. There's no good guys in Warhammer 40k. There's all just bad guys. Okay, fine, right? But remember, you're selling this to millennials, right? And the other component of wokeness means that you have to make things as black and white as possible. Good guys versus bad guys. And sort of the contraposition of there are no good guys in the 40k universe is there are no bad guys in the 40k universe. And that gets you right back, that circles you right back into the right-wing perspective, right? It circles you right back into the right-wing perspective where you're now comparing bad versus bad. And then suddenly the Imperium looks good again, right? Suddenly the Imperium looks like it's nuanced, and all of the bad right-wing conclusions come right back. They did this whole thing this last week where they just condemned the Imperium as being fascist. The Imperium is driven by hate. Games Workshop and 40 Warhammer is not, as a community. Yeah, okay, fine. All right. So you're making a parody out of the Space Marines. Totally fine. I knew there were parodies. There are kind of parodies from the get-go. Okay, so then why are you trying to sell your product as sort of a good versus evil struggle? Because all of the new stuff they're producing lacks none of the sort of grim, dark nuance of the early fiction. It's all trying to just recast 40K as Star Wars. So they're screwed either way. They can't easily do it. It's kind of funny. The golden age of television is officially over. It's been I think that the bookends are The Sopranos and Game of Thrones. Those are the bookends to the golden age of television the golden age of television period. Iron Duke for USA $3. What are your views on the Ghislaine Maxwell trial? Will anything useful come of it? Well, I don't know. I basically think that it's pretty clear what was going on with Epstein. I think he was an asset for some intelligence agency. The intelligence agency felt he was no longer useful, and they eliminated him as an asset, and then they felt embarrassed, and they more thoroughly eliminated him when they got the chance. I'm not going to speculate on which intelligence agency it is, but this is standard practice. The CIA and the KGB have been doing this for a long time. What do? They basically try to harvest blackmail on people. They get important and intelligent people that they think might oppose them into compromising positions, and then they record them, right? And then they so that they have blackmail material so that they can tug the chains whenever these people that they think might be a problem for them get a little bit out of line. And this is a tried and true. This is nothing new. Intelligent agencies have been doing this for the longest time. Murdering him in police captivity, that was a little bit of a, that was quite, that was a move that took a lot of chutzpah. I'll say that, which probably eliminates, a lot of the lower tier intelligence agencies from being the ultimate culprit. But I don't know. I don't think Ghislaine Maxwell actually knows anything. I think she was probably just a gopher. And I think, pulling off two eliminations like this in a row is probably going to cost them more than it's worth. So I don't imagine that anything's going to happen to her. And I don't imagine any revelations are going to come out of it either. I think that cat's buried. And I don't think that there's anything really that's, that I don't think there's any mystery behind what was going on. Again, it's so obvious what this, and to me at least, it's just so obvious what Epstein was. It's so obvious what he was, and he was not anything historically unique. So, I don't know. Just, don't get involved with these people is all you can say. Aristocratic Owl for USA $5. What's your opinion on how we can form a new modern... Oh, sorry, I skipped one. Mathis Mediocrity for $3 USA. How can we as Christians resolve the contention between what we're taught to be moral and right and yet adhere to the friend-enemy distinction? Should we? This is, again, why the Old Testament is so critical, I think. Because, it might be hard to imagine how you hold the friend-enemy distinction in line with the Sermon on the Mount. But that's not hard to see how the just prophets of the Old Testament did this. That was every second of their existence was the friend-enemy distinction, governed by the will of God, obviously. I think that once you add that critical component in, it's not that hard to see. There is sort of perhaps I can sort of steelman this question. The Christians of old, right? Think of all of the Christian kings who were very, very devout and who defended their people against all sorts of invaders and subversion. They were believers. They read more deeply of these scriptures than we ever have in their original languages. They were sincere, and they didn't completely sublimate themselves to this idiotic idea that Christianity means you have to sit down and abase yourself before people who want to hurt your community. I mean, that's just not an accurate reading of the scriptures. And I mean, the answer I always have for this, and you get this constantly from the total. I talk about these rats all the time, that they're not Christian, but they try to wield this heresy against you. They try to weaponize the Sermon on the Mount so that you'll betray your own people. I mean, this is such bullshit, because as Christians, you're called to sacrifice yourself for God first, but secondarily for your friends and your family. You're explicitly told to lay down your life for your friends and for your family. More than just, you're not told to lay down your life for humanity in general, although, I mean, you can be asked to do that for sure. But there is a priority given to friends and family in the way that these laws are laid out. And inside this, there's the obvious caveat to all of this, that if you are responsible for your family, it is not a Christian thing to do to sacrifice your family for the greater good of humanity, or what we're really usually talking about, what the powers of the world tell you is the greater good of humanity. That is actually an abnegation of your sacred responsibility. You don't get Christian points for selling your family into slavery and giving the money to the poor. It is not a charitable act. And if you're the king, or if you're the head of a family, you cannot just, their interests, and you as a representative of their interests, that is not a proper subject of a sacrificial offering to the greater good. The only way you can sacrifice something like that is directly to a command of God. And we're thinking of sort of like an Abraham and Isaac-like situation, which, I mean, I think has almost never happened outside of a few particular moments in the Bible. I would really question any, I mean, I can't say it's never happened historically, obviously, because of the Bible, but it's happened so rarely that I have to say that any revelation I've received telling me to do this, I'd question my sanity before. I would the nature of the, I think it was an accurate pronouncement of God, because it's just such a, you're essentially committing the gravest crime by betraying trust put in you as representative of another person, another party. You've essentially lied to people and betrayed them. As a head of a state or a head of a family, you are a representative of another people's interests. They've put their lives in your hands. You have to have that as a primary responsibility for yourself. And God commands you to hold that as a primary responsibility. And so only a direct command from God can possibly abrogate that direct commandment that you see clearly both in the New Testament and in the Old. So I 99.99999% of these, we can't properly enact collective self-interest because of the Sermon on the Mount. I have so very rarely encountered a theologically honest version of this that, ask me when, here's my answer to this. I mean, find me the person who actually believes this and is not like a genuine Christian momentarily posturing for brownie points and a pat on the head from the establishment, or a completely fake Christian who's either an undercover apostate who's trying to juice the last fumes of their own Christianity for political advancement, or an out-and-out non-Christian, non-believer who's strategically posturing as a Christian so that he can basically further his own avaricious interests. You'd be amazed how many atheists suddenly become absolutely devout Christians. the second they feel they can use that to their political advantage. And it was that Faraday speaks, the best example. Numerously told me in our conversations that he was an atheist, he couldn't believe in God. This just didn't make sense, Dave. I can't believe in this stuff. The second he feels he has me on the line for something, immediately I encounter, Dave, you're going to hell for being a right-winger. That is not sincere. That is, I mean, I don't know. Again, the Christian part of me says I shouldn't question the sincerity of other people's religious beliefs. But, I mean, man, if you're coming out of the gate as a Christian believer with a threat of hell for a political objective, yeah, I'm going to question the sincerity of your religious beliefs. Usually it doesn't begin like that. Sincere religious experiences don't begin with my political enemies are going to hell. And I'm going to inform you of that to try to get a concession so that you can betray your friends for my own political interests. Genuine religious experiences, that's not very usual. I put the probability of that to be really, really low, right? So I don't know. This is a frequent question on this stream. And I would say, like, I've just so... I guess, to be honest, there's another version of this. And that's the Christian who's having a moment of weakness. They genuinely believe in Christianity. They know that the pure form of this critique is bullshit. But you know, they're not thinking right at the moment. They don't have their theological glasses on. They haven't explored all the consequences of saying this. And they know that this is what the smart people are saying. And you know, it kind of makes sense if you squint your eyes. So they just retweet. They put the powerfuls ideology in their own words, they tweet it out there and they get a little pat on the head, right? And that doesn't make them not Christian. That doesn't make them dishonest. They're just not thinking, right? So they're repeating an absolute insanity to the camera because they're not thinking, and in that moment they get the little dopamine reward, right? And that's a very common thing. But I've never actually like sat down with a person, looked in their eyes, you know, who's made one of these arguments of like, okay, man, like let's walk through the implications of what you're saying here. And once you do that, once you pull the thread, it just comes apart. It's all bullshit. And you encounter it for either sort of like the lapse in judgment it is, or as the cynical gaming of genuine religious belief that it is. Yeah, I'm going to have to wind these things down. I don't want to go on for too late because I am genuinely pretty tired. Aristocratic Owl for USA $3. Final question for me tonight. Do you have any thoughts on WASP culture and literature like Moby Dick? Well, isn't Fritz Imperial supposed to be the expert on this? He said he was really getting into this. I read Moby Dick in 2019. I think it was for the second time. The first time I read it when I was in high school, and I absorbed very little of it. And I really liked it. I'm not going to say I loved it. I'm not going to say it was my favorite book of all time. But I was surprised that what stood out to me, where the book really shone, was in the little moments that people usually skip over, and I probably skipped over the first time I read it when I was in high school. The stuff about whaling is usually people kind of roll their eyes with that. It's actually... Many of the most evocative scenes come from these vignettes delivered in those chapters. It's really strange. America is an Anglo-Saxon country. It is a Protestant country. And when I was talking earlier about Gothic, Southern Gothic stuff, and sort of the deep Americana soul, I'm talking to a large degree about Anglo-Saxon culture and Protestant culture. Now, in the American context, a lot of what we know about Southern Gothic comes to us through the eyes of Catholic authors, in a very similar way that the thoroughly pagan spirit of something like Beowulf comes to us through the eyes and through the words of Christian authors when they recorded it in, the 7th century? So it's sort of this kaleidoscopic. It's a Protestant story told through Catholic eyes, in the same way that Beowulf is a pagan story told through Catholic eyes. I absolutely love WASP culture. Moby Dick would be a good example of it. James Fenimore Cooper would be another good example of it. The problem is Americans weren't very well known for novels. Longfellow is a great example of that. Walt Whitman is a great example of that. Two poets right there, right? I know there's another novelist I'm probably blanking on right now, but it's just not coming to me. Scarlet Letter. I was not really ever a big fan of that, but definitely an example of WASP literature wherever there is. This is one of those questions that's just too large. If it was more specific, I probably could talk more about it, but it's too big. I don't have a point to land. I earned 99 for $5. I have a lot of young men in my Discord server who cannot find a good woman to court and marry. I'm a fair bit older than you, so what advice would you, as a young husband of a father, give to young men who want a wife and a family? Well, this is admittedly pre-COVID advice. So, I'm assuming that this advice is going to carry, as far as the COVID rules, I have no idea, right? I have no idea because I don't even know people meet for dates right now. Is that something that's actively going on? What is going on? If everyone's locked down in half the areas in the West, people date in Melbourne when they can go out for half an hour a day. But here's my pre-COVID advice. Okay, so you're a young man. Let's say you're in your 20s. Okay, so the first thing you have to realize is that however much you want a woman, you got to shift this desire into low gear, right? Like you have to sort of occupy yourself comfortably. First of all, you have to stop caring so much about what other people think of you because that comes off very obviously as a young man. And you also have to sort of hold your desire for women very loosely. This is just a good practice for being a man generally, is that if you really, really want something, whether it's a profession or a woman, you have to sort of hold it loosely. You can't, once you start going into sort of this mode where you're thinking about it constantly, it becomes highly counterproductive. So the first thing I said this in other videos is just don't panic, right? You have to teach yourself not to panic and obviously care about what genuine people who think about you because it's a good sanity check. But generally stop caring so much and in sort of these spurgy ways. I use spurgy in sort of the internet euphemism sense. The second one is you have to develop a really, really good capacity to make good male friends. There's you need to know how to walk up to people in a party and just talk to them. You need to know how to plan fun events. And also you need to be passionate about things. So take a few of your interests and dive deep into them. You should have about 3 interests that you're really into. And this interest has to have some component about, and I'm going to add a caveat here. The further away you can get from video games in this, the better, because video games is probably the worst example of this because they obsolete fast and they're entirely not social. But that being said, hobbies and passions are your friend. Passions for music are your friend. Passions for playing instruments are really your friends. For literature, absolutely essential. But as opposed to just generally being interested in a wide variety of things, pick 1 or 2 or 3 of them and try to dive deep. And when you dive deep, find other people who are really interested. And then do things with those people who are really interested. And here's another thing. Do things that are unusual and get you out of your comfort level. And then remember that you did those things and turn them into stories. If you can become a good storyteller, that's a critical feature. So I guess I've sort of built up you as a man at this point. And then if you have those 2 things, if you're somewhat confident in yourself, you have interesting dimensions of your personality, and you know how to sort of communicate yourself as a man to other men, then I think after you accomplish those 3 things, you're ready to sort of hunt for women as serious mates. And in that case, I would shoot the number one most important thing for all men. Get women, the number one disqualifier, never date women who are explicitly against your values. It's just not worth the time. Now, does that mean don't date feminists? Yes and no. There's two types of feminists. There are feminists who are feminists because their favorite movie star is feminists. Those are hard game, but fair. You can pursue them because they're not really feminists. And they're feminists who are true believers. I would just not bother with them. It's just not worth the time. There's also too much risk of a downside. You're not going to argue this person out of their beliefs in any kind of first or second date scenario. And if you put politics in the background, oh man, it's going to bite you 3 or 4 months out. And as a young guy, you want to fail early. And the problem is it's just too easy to fail late with these ideological disagreements. So as a guy, you want to go ideologically neutral or ideologically amenable, or you're not going to find a lot of like passionately right-wing women. They're usually already married. But ideologically open or ideologically neutral is where you want to hit. And when it comes to sort of the religious values, women naturally develop religions. So if you can get a woman who's either in the religion that you are or orbiting around the religion that you are and that you've dedicated yourself to, go for that. I would highly recommend that whatever religious state you are in, like just totally own that, right? If you are a Catholic, like a lapsed Catholic, let's just take that, right? To say like, I am very committed to my Catholic culture and my Catholic, I've always struggled with God and the spirituality, but that is a struggle that I'm on. And like, I'm going to own that struggle. That's now part of me. And like, if you are a woman interested in me, then women actually kind of like this stuff as long as it's owned, right? As long as you're a guy and you're just making it part of yourself. And like, this is my struggle. That's better. Like, that's a good answer. The bad answer is like, oh man, I don't know. Like, I just Catholicism, I don't know how to feel about it. Like, like I was raised with it, but now I'm not. And like, I guess I could, I guess I couldn't. No, that's the wrong answer. Both of those answers are, I'm struggling with Catholicism. But one of them is, this is part of me. And the other one is maybe. Eliminate maybes. Even the maybes in your own life, turn them into processes or adventures. That's a maybe that a woman actually respects. But just hold those core religious and moral values out front. I'm talking about like, this is something you mentioned on the first day. Find a way to, so if you are a genuine religious believer, like it's a big part of yourself, first day, like I'm really serious about my Catholicism. I'm really serious about my Orthodox Judaism. I'm a practicing Muslim. And like, that's just a really big part of me. And like, I'm happy to like teach you about this because I'm passionate about it. And show them that you're passionate about it on the first date. And obviously don't blow them down with, don't. As a guy, if you go through the first steps, you'll learn very quickly the difference between being passionate about something and sort of like going on a spurgy, enthusiastic rant about it where you're not aware of other people. Your relationships with your male friends will teach you the difference between that. So those are the first two things. And so if you have your passions out front and you avoid women who are passionate about things, especially passionate about politics, who are directly in opposition to what you're passionate about, like what you do is you try to pick the community of women that is most likely to give you as many hits in that Goldilocks zone. The Goldilocks zone is a woman in the appropriate age range, obviously, right? A woman who does not have a disqualifyingly large number of previous relationships. That's a big red flag. I don't know, God willing, unless she has some incredible religious conversion story, and you really should be hearing about this conversion story, like, very soon into the testing period if you're going to walk that rocky road, right? And then 3, she has to be ideologically open to where you are, and you also have to be attracted to her too, right? We're guys, right? Which is usually not a hard hurdle to clear for guys. Guys typically they go for basically you have to be in the upper 80%. It's usually a pretty reasonable bar for most women to clear. So you just need to go to a dating community that has the most positive, the highest frequency of women like that. Church communities are a good place to find that. Dating sites that are targeted towards a more conservative set might be. By the time I used dating sites, I was using them explicitly, religiously. And as I always say, use a religious dating site, you got to be 100%. Otherwise, it's just not worth it. And you're diluting it. You're kind of ruining the experience for everyone else. But yeah, there are spaces where these women hang out, and you have to kind of come into yourself and then find them. One thing I would kind of recommend against, don't do stuff like, this is something that like I tried in my 20s and doesn't work. Don't like try to go to ballroom dancing events. Like, these are sort of like, it sounds like a good idea. It sounds like, okay, I'm a reasonably attractive, or I'm a single guy in their 20s. I've got like reasonable prospects. I'm not like a bad date. I should go to a place where there's like a lot of women. And what do women like? They like ballroom dancing. There's never enough people to go dancing with them. I'll just do that. I had a football player friend who I was in an engineering program with. And when I told him that, I'd tried this for like several years. I told him that, he laughed at me. Because because it's obvious you're not passionate about it, right? It's obvious that you're doing, don't get me wrong. If you can take a swing dancing lesson and be a reasonably competent dancer so that when you have a girl on a date, you can impress her with that, that's a different story, right? That's just you being skilled. That's just you having assets. But if you go to an event as a guy single, you're already in an incredibly compromised position. Because A, you're not passionate about this thing, and it's obvious you're not passionate about it. And that will show unless you're an incredibly good poker player across all walks of life. B, you're obviously fishing. Women tap in on this. They're not going to react to that. When you go into a situation with women, you have to be 100% fronting what you're passionate about, what you're about. And you have to communicate that you're interested in her, but not overly. And that's what women respond to. And, so things like anything where to do it, you'd have to be thirsty is just a bad idea. They're sort of like Scylla and Charybdis with these passions. They can't be video games, right? Which are just like, they're just a nihilistic pit that'll suck you in. You can't be, with some rare exceptions like Minecraft, or if you're a championship player, maybe some rare exceptions there, but probably not. And then the other side, you've got like ballroom dancing, which is just like, if you're doing it and you're not super passionate, like you're not going to Juilliard or actually trying to be an expert dancer, this is obviously a thirst move. Just like, don't do that. Get the steps down, impress a woman you're already dating, but just don't hunt there, right? And then like, what you're looking for is something more on the middle, like playing the guitar. Like, a lot of guys just like playing the guitar. A lot of guys just like hiking. A lot of guys just like, going out there and surfing. And there's a reason why surfers get chicks, and it's not because they're good looking. Well, probably they have good physiques, but that's almost secondary to the fact that it's the passion that women are interested in. Then I spent too long on this answer, so I'm going to go on. Hominid 8 for USA $10. Okay, at 11, please no more super chats. My voice is running out. I've been strongly considering converting to Catholicism, but my major sticking point is the current pope. What would you say to somebody like me who is hesitant because of this? How do you deal with a leader of your church acting in such a political way? Well, I'm afraid I don't have a very good answer for this, because this is a constant point of pain for me. The church leadership has persistently been raining down pain for me it's persistently been raining down pain on people like me and my allies for the last 5 years, and it's been causing us embarrassment when it's not been specifically targeted at moving healthy elements of the church into positions of decreased power and prominence. I'm not going to say it's not a problem, but I'll say this. This is going to be kind of a very engineering answer. You got 3 options. Well, first of all, are you Christian? If you can't say the Nicene Creed, you're not Christian, so this conversation about corruption in the church is irrelevant, right? Okay, so if you're Christian, you're saying the Nicene Creed, you got three options. First, you're Protestant. You believe in the church of all believers. A, I think your leadership problems as a Protestant are worse and not better than Catholics. That really should be the B point, but the B point sequentially is B, I don't think there's a lot of evidence for that historically. I think that's kind of a bullshit theological claim. And to all respect of my Protestant friends, I think that it was very obvious, if you look at early Christians, there's supposed to be an actual institutional political church in existence. So, I mean, for me, that kind of closes down the Protestant route. Okay, so if you're not a Protestant, you've got two more remaining options. The first, the non-Catholic option is Orthodoxy, or some variation of Orthodoxy. Okay, so these are technically more based than Catholicism right now. Okay, the problem is that they're more based because they're not in the West. These churches have been saved from our current spate of embarrassing leaders because they're not facing the full brunt of the cathedral, and their financial interests aren't located in the West where this problem is going on. So if you're fleeing from wokeness, you might dodge a bullet this time. But A, if this woke phenomenon goes on for 80 more years, I imagine the same struggles that the Catholics are dealing with right now, you'll deal with in about 50 years. And if, this wokeness bug destroys itself in the next 40 years, in which event, maybe the Orthodox Church will have dodged a bullet. But that dodging a bullet will not be an indication that it has some immunity from this corruption, as an indication that it actually is the true church of Christ. It will be a historical accident based on where this particular poisonous heresy erupted, in a purely geographic sense. And also, here's one more thing. In the event that, the church is a looser thing, like it's just a series of bishops, still institutional, but geographically located, my Christianity is the Christianity of the West, and I'm going to fight for it here. So that's how I think about things. I hope that helps you answer your question, but I'm not going to say that I have all the answers for this. Okay, I think this is the last one. Mathis's Mediocrity for $3 USA. Thank you for your response to my question. It's still hard to separate the worldview that's been taught to us versus what's actually moral truth. Sorry if the super chat came off as smug. It wasn't my intent. What was the original? Oh yeah, this is the friend enemy distinction one. No, this is actually like a super this is a super relevant question because it's a cheap heresy it's a very sincere question. I recognize it as such. This sort of attack on Christianity or attack on sanity, it's the sort of thing that the Aiden and Sitch were doing when they said like, oh, you should be for mass migration as long as it's Catholic. It's a bullshit moderate position that's transparently not believed by anyone who speaks of it. They're just trying to rope you in and get you on the hook for insanity because, they know that they have you on the hook for a moral belief. And as nihilists, they know that they can abuse that. And there's no fear of abusing that. I can't imagine. I mean, I don't know. I just think that that's just a really morally questionable place to be. If you're not a nihilist and you're trying to cynically gain someone else's moral system to sort of wield that against them, I'm trying to think if I've ever done that. I hope I haven't. And if I do, I pray that I remember that I've done that and repent of it publicly. And if someone can remember me doing that, I will repent of that publicly because I don't ever want to do that to somebody else. To that question, someone's complaining that I'm ragging on Protestantism. I'm just trying to answer the questions honestly, man. If you were to ask me why am I not a Protestant, it's because I believe that the church is supposed to be an actual institution and not some vague alliance of all believers everywhere at all times. That's not me putting down Protestantism. That's just me explaining why I'm not a Protestant. if I can't, like, I've said this to people who've tried to sort of kick up this, like I'm somehow, like, I deeply respect Protestantism as a fellow Christianity. Like, I deeply respect these people. A lot of them are more holy than I am. I'm not trying to put this down, but if I cannot on this channel explain my genuine beliefs in a way that's straightforward, without trying to step around ridiculous hurdles, like, I should just disband this entire channel, right? Because, if I bow to this, someone will be like, "Oh wow, you're not being charitable to homosexuals by saying that homosexuality is immoral." If I were playing by those rules, I would just shut up about everything I've talked about on this entire channel. And I would basically literally play by the rules I'm asked to play by every day in my real life. And, like, fuck that. I'm sorry I'm swearing, but fuck that. Right? Pardon my French. I guess I shouldn't, as a Christian, I shouldn't use swear words, but I feel I need to emphatically close the door on this bullshit, because it's bullshit. I should just disband this channel if I can't confess to why I'm not a Protestant explicitly. But, I think that the challenge by orthodoxy is a little bit more pertinent, because in my opinion, it's fundamentally a political one. I think it has a political answer that comes down on the side of Rome, but it's much more a sort of boundary condition type thing, right? It balances on the edge of a knife. And so I feel much less comfortable about the answer to that. I feel I have good answers, and I feel that my answers are sincere, and that's all I really can say that I have at this stage. That being said, it's after 11 p.m. How about I end with a psalm, just so I shouldn't be getting more super chats. I don't think I miss. Let's end with a psalm. I've been really enjoying the psalms. Somebody should. Okay, how about the first super chat dollar donation amount will be the psalm that I read. Okay, it's Psalm 3. Psalm number 3. If I could flip through this stupid, I need to get a better book than this. This is like when I first got when I came back to Catholicism. Psalm 3. How I end this stream. The psalm for threatened but trusting believers. It begins, "How many are my foes, Lord? How many rise against us? How many say to us, God will not save that one? But you, O Lord, are a shield around me. My glory, Lord, you keep my head high. Whenever I cried out, the Lord, I was answered from his holy mountain. Whenever I lay down and slept, the Lord preserved me to rise again. I do not fear then. Thousands of people arrayed against me on every side. Arise, Lord, save me, my God. You will shatter the jaws of all my foes. You will break the teeth of the wicked. Safety comes from the Lord, your blessings for your people." In a pre-COVID world, that didn't make any sense. It's making a lot of sense now. So with that, guys, I think I'll probably end this stream. You've been a wonderful audience. I'll try to do a distant stream at some point. I need to get more on a regular schedule and get past this phase in work. And then I'll try to maybe spend some more time making the longer form videos I constantly put off. But at any rate, have a great night, and I will see you later.